Welcome. Today we'll be examining the 2014 Sewol Ferry tragedy through the lens of human factors and systemic decision-making failures. We'll break down how individual errors, organizational shortcomings, and cultural dynamics combined to cause a national tragedy as well as what we can learn from it. On April 16, 2014, the Sewol Ferry, carrying 476 passengers, mostly high school students, capsized off South Korea's coast and 304 lives were lost. This presentation explores not just what happened, but why it happened and how human factors played a critical role. The ferry departed Incheon the evening of April 15th. Early the next morning, an untrained crew member turned the ship 15 degrees, 10 degrees further than the ship could withstand. Within minutes, cargo shifted, the ship listed severely, and confusion ensued. Evacuation orders were delayed, and rescue teams also arrived late and underestimated the urgency. This analysis focuses on decision-making under pressure. We aim to understand, why did the captain, crew, and rescue teams make flawed choices, and how did human factors contribute to a preventable loss of life? My investigation used primary sources such as court records, the Korean Maritime Safety Tribunal report, and Coast Guard communication transcripts, as well as survivor testimonies. I also reviewed secondary sources, including academic studies on disaster response and stress models. To identify root causes, we applied the 5 whys technique. Why didn't passengers evacuate? They were told to stay. Why? The captain delayed evacuation. Why? He was unsure of the risk and feared career consequences. Why? He lacked crisis training. Why? Systemic failure and maritime oversight. We can also evaluate this incident using the PEAR model. Starting with people, the captain lacked proper training in emergency leadership. Crew members were temporary hires with minimal drills, and passengers, mainly students, obeyed instructions without question due to authority conditioning rooted in Korean culture. Next, environment. Environmental conditions were poor. The water was frigid and visibility was low. Inside the listing vessel, movement was restricted, and external pressure from the media and the ferry company only served to cause further stress. The crew had also chosen to use a channel well known for being unpredictable in an effort to cut cost, only complicating efforts. Next, actions. Critically, the captain left the bridge early and failed to issue a timely evacuation. Crew members did not assist passengers, and the Coast Guard misjudged the emergency scope. These actions were shaped by fear, confusion, and procedural gaps. Lastly, resources were insufficient. Lifeboats were inoperable or hard to access, life jackets were outdated and under-maintained, and the ferry had no working alert system. As well, regulatory inspections had been falsified. These resource failures enabled the tragedy. Using human error taxonomy, we can classify the errors. Their slips and lapses were that crew misjudged the urgency, their mistakes were that the captain assumed staying aboard was safer, and their violations were that the crew abandoned passengers and that the company overloaded cargo illegally to the point of insufficient ballast water, contributing to the capsizing. We can also evaluate this incident using the Swiss cheese model, each layer representing a defense. Holes in regulation, training, communication, and equipment lined up to let this disaster through. Active failures were enabled by latent systemic conditions. The captain likely relied on recognition-prime decision-making. Under pressure, he defaulted to prior experience, which was waiting for external rescue, but this heuristic failed in an unstable, rapidly evolving emergency. According to Martinson and Hunter, cognitive overload impairs decision-making. Add cultural obedience where students are conditioned to trust authority, and you have a deadly combination. Many never even attempted to escape because they followed orders. Survivor testimonies underscore the horror. One student recalled, "We waited like we were told. Then the floor became the wall." These voices humanize the analysis and remind us of the cost of systemic failure. To prevent future incidents, there should require crisis simulation training for all maritime crew, enforce independent inspections, develop public education on evacuation protocols, and foster leadership models that emphasize action and ambiguity. The Sewol Ferry tragedy shows how poor decisions and systemic neglect can converge with devastating results. Applying human factors models helps us identify what failed, why it failed, and how we must improve. Thank you, and be sure to stick around for the reflection after the credits. Citations include the Korean Maritime Safety Tribunal, court records, academic sources on decision-making and stress, and survivor interviews. Media from Al Jazeera, YouTube, and Getty Images provide visual context. Creating this presentation on the Sewol Ferry tragedy has been both intellectually and emotionally impactful. On the surface, it may appear to be a simple case of poor decision-making in a crisis, but through this analysis it became clear how deeply interconnected human behavior, systemic flaws, and cultural norms were in the chain of failures that led to this disaster. What struck me most was how small decisions, like a delayed evacuation order or skipping routine safety training, can snowball into catastrophic consequences when embedded within a weak system. The PEAR model helped me see how pressure, lack of resources, and poor preparation created an environment where even experienced individuals made critical errors. The Swiss cheese model reminded me that disasters rarely stem from one mistake. They emerge when multiple gaps align across layers of defense. But beyond the frameworks, this case is ultimately about lives lost. The stories of students who waited obediently, parents who never got answers, and survivors who carry lifelong trauma are sobering. It's a reminder that behind every incident are human beings, not just statistics or case studies. This reflection has taught me that analyzing human factors isn't just about identifying failure, it's about using those insights to advocate for change. Better training, stronger oversight, and a culture that values safety over shortcuts. My hope is that through this work, I can contribute to preventing similar tragedies in the future.